Hello and welcome to the Sami Parvez show. Today I'm joined by Claypool, who is the senior correspondent of the National Telegraph. We will be discussing about federal and provincial politics. Thank you so much, Wyatt, for joining me on Sami Parvez show. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
That's great to be on.
Thank you. Okay, so as we are seeing the Canadian politics, especially in Ottawa, so what do you take from it? Like with respect to foreign interference, and we saw many scandals. Like it seems like we are heading toward a third world country. What we usually hear, like how does corruption happen down there? And it seems like same thing is happening here. So what's your take on that?
Well, the thing with foreign interference and the way it's affected Canadian politics is I think it had its peak probably in the last election, 2021. As soon as it became a scandal for the Liberals and it got exposed, you can't do the same trick twice after it's been sort of pointed out what you're doing. And in a certain sense, I don't even know if the Liberals were intentionally doing it as much as they know that the Chinese government, for an example, likes them. They prefer them to the conservatives, and they're willing to not say anything if the CCP's front groups are going to be distributing brochures in heavily Chinese neighborhoods and trying to get those people to vote for a liberal candidate. And obviously, there are going to be some politicians who have just direct ties to the CCP government, like Han Dong seems to have. And then in terms of a country like Iran, there's obviously Majid Jahari out in Richmond or Richmond Hill, who is obviously just a cutout for the Iranian government. It's not even a secret if Iranian parliamentarians show up to Canada, even though they have no embassy here. The first thing they do is they go to Majid Jahari's house and hang out there. But what I would, so I think that right now it got to the point where it was probably affecting a handful of seats in Canada, that a handful of seats you could very reasonably say were affected because of foreign interference, and the MP is illegitimate. At the same time, what I'm hopeful about is the fact that so many people know about foreign interference. If it happens in this next election, somebody's going to immediately say, "Hey, that's not like that's sketchy," and then report it to the news, because most people aren't that politically savvy. Where if they see a brochure come out going after a conservative candidate or MP as like an anti-Chinese racist, most people are going to think that's typical political attacks. Now, if somebody sees that, they're going to be like, "Oh, this looks like pro-Beijing propaganda,"
Mhm.
and probably report it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you are right. It began back in 2019, but you don't think it happened in the past as well? It means, was there a lenient of a liberal government, as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said back in 2013? He admires China because of its dictatorship, and he visited, I don't know how long he went to a state visit to China. Like we recently saw uh, Jolie Millen, she visited secretly to China. It seems like lots of things are going on behind the closed door. Uh, so don't you think like liberal government is more like, it means soft on China?
And I think that Justin Trudeau has always been soft on China, maybe somewhat for electoral reasons, that there is a mainland Chinese, more pro-Beijing demographic in Canada. It's not as big as people would think. You're mostly going to have it affecting ridings out in Vancouver, Richmond area, where there is just a significant population of people who still have some loyalty to the government in Beijing, whether it's just through genuine loyalty or through social pressure because you still have family back home. And so if you someone detects that you vote the wrong way and you vote for anti-Beijing politicians, then you might be affected. I think in a certain sense, what Trudeau was doing was more so sucking up in 2013, thinking that if I become prime minister, I want to be able to sign deals better with China. I want them to be a close ally, like my father tried to make them. And that's why he was saying something that's so patently ridiculous. Part
Mhm.
of it is that he is genuinely kind of a radical himself.
Mhm.
And then the other part of it is that Justin Trudeau is just a guy who, like, I think is just doing retail politics,
Mhm.
but on a foreign policy level. He's saying things to make countries like him so that when he shows up there, maybe they're more willing to sign a deal and see it his way, just like to stay on side on the demographic of Khalistanis who still vote liberal. He's
Mhm.
willing to take shots at India when it makes no diplomatic sense to roll it out in the way he did, even if he's correct about it. He talks about foreign policy often in a way where you like most people would say it's a very foolish way of doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, but as you mentioned, like he is also taking shots on India to support. It seems like being more supporter of Khalistan, though Khalistani like terrorists were behind bombing Air India. Like it killed numbers of Canadian citizens as well. And it seems like it mean in India that they are a terrorist organization, but they can walk freely here and they do their everything like voting or referendum. It seems like, and we also saw like they are holding knives and those like soured, like which technically is not allowed, but they were given more lenient. But as we know, like
Well, I think a good
conservative.
example of just how blatant you can be as a Khalistani like ideologue
Mhm.
is the wedding video that came out where those
Yeah.
guys are coming around carrying around AK-47s, they have their finger on the trigger and they're celebrating or whatever. And it's like I think that they were probably surprised that the RCMP actually investigated them for that.
Mhm.
And the RCMP only investigated them because people on X, people on Twitter, made a lot of noise about it to the point where the RCMP couldn't keep pretending that they didn't know where this video was from. They don't even know if it's in Canada because
Yeah.
that's actually the excuses they originally made. But then
Mhm.
if you get people like Mocha, Bratney, Kean Bexley, Daniel Boardman, Salman Sima, all these people
Yeah.
pointing out saying, we know that this guy over here is from Seek for Justice. This
Mhm.
is definitely happening in Canada.
Yeah.
Please show up to their public address and start asking questions that it eventually happened. But for the most part, you can do whatever you want and nobody's ever actually going to come after you.
Mhm. Yeah. But it seems like yeah, so I was asking like about conservative leader Pierre Pouliot, like he is also like, don't you think he is also taking the same stance with respect to identity politics as Justin Trudeau is doing?
Mhm. Jagmeet Singh?
No, Justin Trudeau.
Oh,
Like Pierre Pouliot is doing the same thing. Like he's wearing also the costumes, or he's being also the pro like Khalistani. Like you saw the video of he's attending a Sikh like I don't know, it was a gathering or something. They are uh raising some slogans, something like that with
Well,
respect
it's
to
like I
Muslim.
don't, and the thing is, I know what you're talking about. A lot of people go after Polyev for going to like a Vaisakhi parade or whatever, and some Sikh parade, and is this identity politics type stuff where I'm trying to pander? And a
Mhm.
little bit of it, it's just that's kind of how Canadian politics works. That
Mhm.
if you're going to go reach out to a cultural group,
Yeah.
oftentimes they want you to come to a temple or somewhere where they expect you to put on some sort of some sort of like head wrap if you're a man or whatever, or cover your hair if you're a woman. It's like sometimes you can't avoid that. Maybe you should just say, hey, your community can meet me on neutral ground and we should just talk about policy because that's really what it's about. It has nothing to do with me pretending that I care about your culture. And I don't say that in a harsh or negative way. I say that from the perspective of I think it kind of becomes a little bit, it obscures the issues we want to talk about
Mhm.
when people are always showing up to cultural events and pretending they care about the cultural event. Not that they hate it, but it's just like obviously the person wouldn't be doing it on their own time if they weren't a politician. And it is probably better for Canadian politics. for people just to simply have events where they meet a politician in like an auditorium and they ask them questions. Because I find all the cultural stuff means that people end up liking a politician for things that have nothing to do with their policy because, hey, they celebrate my culture. It's like, well, who cares if they're going to raise your taxes? Who cares if they're going to make life worse for you? Because that's been the whole thing with Trudeau is that you'll still have like liberals online activist types saying, well, he really gets Canadians because he goes to pride parades and he goes to, Carib festivals and he goes to all like this, that, other place. I think it's technically considered like offensive for me to say Carib, I just meant Caribbean. But but the thing is, it's all fake. It doesn't showing up to a festival and eating a Jamaican patty does not mean that you actually care about like Jamaican people in Canada. And so wouldn't it be better for you just to be able to put out a policy document that proves that these people's lives are actually going to be made better by you making things more affordable?
Mhm. But you mean like it is more better like politicians do work rather than just showing up there in their custody.
And yeah, and I think that politics has very much become a game of imagistics
Hmm.
that you want the image that, hey, I saw these people and I was respectful to them. I came to their cultural event. I came to their temple. I came to their church. Even as like a Baptist myself, I'm not somebody who's very into politicians showing up to churches because it's just like you shouldn't be there. They can meet you somewhere else. You can have a coffee and invite them, but it's not about you. But there are a lot of groups who are willing to kind of use their religious buildings as sort of headquarters for
Hmm.
what community leaders are doing. So it almost cheapens. I feel like if I was Sikh, it would feel like I'm cheapening the temple by having politicians show up and effectively just use it as like a touring ground to be seen with Sikh people.
Hmm. Yeah, and how do you see like we saw like Justin Trudeau appointed his first cabinet gender balance 50-50. It means diversity. He always talks about diversity is the source of strength, and also always appoint people based on their race, religion, or origin. So, do you think Pierre Pouliot would make a difference than Trudeau?
Yes, I think that true. I think the way that Polyev has positioned himself set him up for this next election. If he wins, he has to get a lot of stuff done. And you could say, well, that's every politician. Not really. If an Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole won, based on the attitude they projected and the policies they ran on, they
Mhm.
wouldn't really have to do that much to pretend that they have basically achieved their mandate.
Mhm.
Whereas Polyev, for him to actually be considered not a liar, he's going to have to do a lot of stuff, which is good. I want him to aim high, and even if there's certain things he doesn't get done, at least get a lot done. And
Mhm.
for him to get any respect back, he's going to have to at least defund the CBC, lower taxes, end funding for woke organizations. There's a lot of stuff around enforcing free speech on campuses by not having federal dollars go to universities who basically violate free speech. There's a lot of different things, getting rid of the carbon tax, a lot of different like wasteful spending cuts they're going to go through. I think he has to do a lot in
Mhm.
order to actually achieve what he set out to do, banning central bank digital currencies from being implemented by the Central Bank of Canada. So there is a lot of stuff he has to do for him to feel legitimate in the eyes of his base. And the problem in the past is that leaders told you absolutely nothing, and then you had no right to even really complain that they didn't get that much done. Frankly, Stephen Harper, after the 2011 election, when he had a majority, he actually didn't really run on much other than the NDP and the Liberals are trying to prevent me from getting stuff done because they're trying to create this like ridiculously dysfunctional coalition government. And then that election happened, and it like that like and he didn't really have to promise anything, so he didn't end up actually doing that much during his majority years.
Mhm. So you think like not doing enough like during his majority year, so they costed him his government. Like they could not win, like in 2015 they did very poor. No one was projecting to be on that stage.
If I'm ballparking this, I would say it's a it's a 60-30-10 problem.
Mhm.
60% of the problem is the election campaign was just very poorly run by the conservatives. The
Mhm.
advertising was terrible. They didn't land good shots on Justin Trudeau. It's the election where they were running that ad, Justin Trudeau, he's just not ready, which implies that Justin Trudeau might be ready at some point. And
Mhm.
also it's an entire ad about evaluating him and thinking about him seriously being the prime minister. And so 60% was just, it was a lifeless campaign. Like Harper just didn't have energy. I've heard from people in the background that they were just depressed the entire time. Staff were just depressed just
Mhm.
because you couldn't do anything and just felt like you're in a holding pattern the entire election campaign. Just nothing was happening. It was lifeless. The 30% of the problem was the fact that they didn't have as many achievements to run on. If you do a lot of stuff, the election just wins itself
Yeah.
simply because it's like you have a vision. People want to stay on board this train because a lot's getting done. Ralph Klein in Alberta could have basically not done any work to get reelected when he first became premier in the next subsequent elections because he was getting stuff done. Because stuff like there felt like a momentum was behind the province now because of what he's doing. And even if you're on the left, you can still do this, even if I don't agree with your policies. There have been premiers who have, like projected kind of a feeling of, success and momentum. They have a good vision and all this stuff. So that's the 30 problem. The 10% problem is frankly that Justin Trudeau has high name recognition and brand recognition, and
Mhm.
that helped him out a lot. People never can underestimate how much just being known helps you.
Mhm.
That's why right now in the United States, I think Kamala Harris is going to pretty handily lose
Yeah.
because nobody knows who she is really. And people know who she is, but in American politics, if 100% of people don't know who you are, that's a problem. And she's probably in the 80% range, where if a lot of young people were asked, who is this? And you held up a photo, people wouldn't be able to tell you. And if you like you said you brought up Kamala Harris's name, then you brought up four pictures of different women, they probably would have hard times figuring out which one it is. Whereas with Donald Trump, he has like 110% name recognition. There are people who don't exist who know who Donald Trump is.
Mhm.
And being known means your people are more likely to show up. Being less known means that there's a whole demographic of people who don't care who you are and are probably not going to vote.
Mhm. Yeah, and you brought up like US politics. So it is like mainstream media is playing a critical role for Democrats and Republican as Robert Kennedy Jr. is running as an independent candidate, like he's not getting that much coverage and he's complaining about it. So do you think this mainstream media would play a role, like if we would get the same amount of coverage and get on a presidential debate, it would change the things.
I would say no. Obviously, if he got way more attention and they were doing like long hour sit down interviews with him on the different networks, yeah, maybe he wouldn't be at 5 or 6%. He'd be at 8%. At the
Mhm.
same time, he needs to be able to get signatures to get on ballots in different states. And they've been having a problem getting their signatures in many of these states. A lot of the states, some of the states is very easy to get on the ballot. Other states, they want you to have 75,000 signatures to get on the ballot. And you could say, well, that seems really high. Well, to win an election in many of these states, you need millions of votes. So at least try to get 75,000 signatures, which is not that hard.
Yeah.
You just if you have a big enough team and you're truly a serious candidate, it should be easy to do. Just drop a few $100,000 in that state, and not only are you gaining signatures, but you're also gaining name recognition at the doors. You're letting people know this guy's running. We're just getting our signatures. Like that would be if he can pull off that, then he can win. And I think at the end of the day, it sounds extremely simplistic, but people vote for what they want. And what people don't really want is they don't really want even though I don't think RFK Jr. is a bad guy, they don't want the very gravelly voiced independent with very mixed views on everything, where he's free speech, but he's also extremely anti-gun. He's a extreme naturalist who doesn't like modern medicine and whatnot, and that's like a legitimate thing. He's been anti-vax for like 20 years, and been against a lot of like pharmaceutical type products for a very long time. He has very strange views. He's an isolationist on foreign policy. He's a very mixed bag of policy issues that a lot of people he doesn't appeal to people on more than just narrow grounds on specific issues. So it makes it hard for people to want to vote for you when they
Mm,
only agree with you on one third of the issues. It's same thing with the Green Party, same thing with Cornel West. They're not popular because people don't want to vote for them. Is
mm,
it because they're not the Democratic or Republican candidate? Yeah, that helps that they don't have the brand or name recognition. But if you were good enough, you could also just win that primary. Not like the Kamala Harris is the one person in U.S. history who hasn't won a primary um, or even before the primary system hasn't won the approval of state legislatures across the country. And it's like it's kind of a problem. Like if people seriously wanted RFK Jr., he probably could have won the Democratic primary, or he'd be punching it way higher. This really does feel like I think his name was like Joe Anderson or whatever. He ran in the 1980 election when Reagan and oh, well, why am I forgetting his name? I don't know why I'm forgetting the peanut farmer president. Why am I? He's still alive. He's like 99.
Carter.
Carter.
Jimmy
There you
Carter.
go. Jimmy Carter. Why am I forgetting it? I forgot his name there. But Joe Anderson ran in the primaries against Reagan, and then he felt like he got screwed over or whatever. So he ran in the presidential, and I think he got like 5% or whatever. And the thing is that if you're a charismatic enough person, you could be a Ross Perot where you're going above 20% of the vote, and you're a legitimate contender. Evan McMullin in 2016 was an independent candidate and he won 25 or 23% of the vote in Utah, like against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. If you have a narrative, you can run on it. It's just that I don't feel like RFK Jr. has a place to really run in this election. In the sense that, like, if you like RFK on a lot of issues, you should probably just be voting Trump. And if you like RFK on certain other issues, you should probably just be voting for Kamala Harris. John B. Anderson. Okay, there we go.
But as you were saying, they need like 75,000 somewhere like signature. But I think Robert Kennedy yesterday posted on it on X that they have their names on all 50 states. Uh, who knows what will happen next? But let's come to the Canadian politics. So how do you see NDP like under Jagmeet Singh? Is Jagmeet is the problem or it's the NDP itself?
Part of it's the NDP itself. It's a trade unionist party that doesn't hasn't always had a good appeal with normal middle class Canadians. And under Jagmeet Singh, I think he's deepened the problems of the party because he has doubled down on being the very unionish type party in such a way it actually alienates a lot of blue collar union guys because they really don't like the kind of LARPing like it's the 1930s and we're fighting back against, big like robber barons or whatever. It's silly. And then he also has expanded the party only towards college students more. He's really, really looking for the 18-year-old white girl vote. And
Mm,
so that's why the NDP has historically only done well in big union towns, Hamilton, and they've done really well, or, Hamilton, Winnipeg, and then they've done well in college towns, college ridings where there's a university on campus and there's an extra, 15,000 voters in that riding who are, all between the ages of 18 and like 24.
mm,
And so the thing with Jagmeet Singh though is that he like at a time when the liberals are collapsing, somehow he can't win any new voters. And it is just because it's just because again his feel is off. A lot of politics is about the feel of the candidate, and Jagmeet Singh feels like a lefty elitist the same way Justin Trudeau is. That's what made Jack Layton and even Thomas Mulcair. It just Thomas Mulcair looked bad because he wasn't as good as Jack Layton, but that's what made Jack Layton a good leader. Jack Layton seemed like somebody who could actually be on a work site and not look physically uncomfortable. Jagmeet Singh, even when he's at a union like protest, some sort of like random, I guess what they call like a wildcat like boycott or like protest or whatever it is, strike,
mm,
that he's there in like a Canada Goose coat, like really puffy jacket, looking like he doesn't want to be around these people at all because they work grubby, hands-on jobs. He wants to talk to office workers who are part of unions.
yeah.
That's the thing with Jagmeet Singh is that he very clearly doesn't like being around members of his own base.
Mm,
And so he's always had a money problem. And the funny, like, so every single election, the NDP basically has to mortgage their own headquarters in order to fund the campaign, and then the next couple of years they have to pay off that mortgage.
Yeah.
Because they finance the HQ in order to be able to pay for anything in the election, which
Mhm.
you're technically allowed to do. But with the NDP, I think that they're just going to have to wait until Jagmeet Singh moves on after this next election.
Mhm.
I don't even think he's sticking around for the pension. He doesn't need the pension. He's a lawyer. He could make more money as just being a lawyer. I think he simply just likes being seen on television. I think he is very much a publicity hound, and he just wants to stick around because when somebody makes a documentary on Justin Trudeau,
Yeah.
well, he has to be covered too during that. He gets to be talked about. And I think that's really what motivates Jagmeet Singh. He likes being seen and talked about.
Mm. So, is there a lack of leadership in NDP? Like they are not kicking out Jagmeet Singh because they know like he is doing poorly. Like we saw, like he did the same thing in 2019 and then again 2021, and he did not make any improvement. Like even though like he signed a coalition government, like agreement like with liberal government to keep propping it up until the next election.
Yeah, and I think is that what you could have done, because the confidence and supply agreement just made Jagmeet Singh look weak.
Mm.
I would have just said we're going to work with the government on a case by case basis, and
Yeah.
that's it. And Justin Trudeau can approach me whenever he wants to get something done, and I'll look over it and see if it's in the best interest of our supporters and voters and Canadians in general, like flowery language like that. But signing on to it, he basically just rubber stamped the fact that I am now with Justin Trudeau. So
Mm.
NDP leaders have historically always enjoyed, and this is also what happens with the Green Party, they've always historically enjoyed an oddly high approval rating
Mhm.
simply because they're not dangerous in people's minds. They're
Yeah.
never going to be the prime minister. They don't have a lot of power. He's probably a nice guy because what are they going to do?
Mhm.
And so the NDP's also always had very, honestly, before Jack Layton, they always had usually what I would define as very square, uh, hyper earnest women usually leading the party.
Mhm.
Always go back to the 2000 debate, and there's this lady wearing like this really orange pantsuit or whatever like that, or like with a skirt or whatever. And like she like very earnestly talking about workers and how you're not blah blah blah, and it was like, ugh. But those people would still have a positive approval ratings because again, they're not even factors. They don't matter. And so people are willing to think nice things. It's not just because Jack Layton was super charismatic himself, people liked him. MVP leaders have always generally been liked. As soon as Jagmeet Singh signed that agreement, over the next 6 months, his positive approval rating deteriorated and now he's in the negatives for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And again, like it's not that it's just because it's the NDP, they're never going to do well. They could be doing far better. Again, Jack Layton proved it. You can do better if you're an NDP leader.
Yeah.
And if they were smart after getting rid of Jagmeet Singh, they should tap a John Horgan type person to lead them. I don't like John Horgan's politics, but I can tell from just a pure political perspective of just who gets things done for the party. A John Horgan would bring back that blue collar base that Jagmeet Singh has just lost, or a Wab Kinew. Wab Kinew could definitely do it because I don't really, he's more of what I would call a blue collar NDPer, like a blue NDPer. You know how they always say red Tories and stuff
Yeah.
like that? He is
Mhm.
a blue NDPer. So even though he is still a woke trade unionist, uh, you know, college town type NDP guy. The thing is, he knows he signed on to Poilievre's plan to axe the carbon tax
Yeah.
because that's a smart thing to do. That's a pro-worker thing to do. So
Mhm.
just because other people on the left flank of your party are going to say, no, we got to be like hyper-environmentalist on everything, he's still an environmentalist on a lot of issues. But he knows that this one's not worth fighting over, and you're going to help a lot of manufacturing, a lot of kind of those hands-on type workers
Mhm.
with all the extra costs that end up hurting affordability and making it so that they can't be paid more because the company they work for is getting absolutely gouged on the carbon tax. He's smart on that front. David Eby is like a orange NDPer. That guy is like, basically just a communist. That's like the worst possible type of a leader that the NDP could pick if Jagmeet Singh goes. It would be a David Eby, hasn't really earned his position, just comes off like David Eby is like the symbol of what you think an NDP male voter is. Kind of like, woke, peevish, thin looking, kind of whiny in the way he talks. And I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm just saying pure stereotype. The worst possible sort of image of a voter you could make
Mhm.
is David Eby would be that for the NDP. And there has been that for conservatives. And that would have probably been like an Andrew Scheer, is that Andrew Scheer did not cut a very good image. He's kind of overly smiley, overly family manish in a way that kind of comes off as weak. And Justin Trudeau, I think, has turned into very much the worst possible version of what a liberal is in people's minds. But that's more so people hate Justin Trudeau. I would say it's probably more like a Michael Ignatieff is a great example of what people don't like in a liberal. It is a know-it-all person who believes that they just, they're just smarter than you, and that's why you should listen to them. That's always been the very corporate way that the corporate Ivy League kind of character that the liberals have had that they've had to try and move away from. So every party is always having to try and lean into its strengths and away from its weaknesses. And right now, I think Jagmeet is a leader that fully leans into weaknesses.
Yeah. And what do you take from Greens? Like it seems like Elizabeth May is staying around. Like we saw, like there was a leadership race back in 2020, I believe. Then after 2021 leadership, 2021 election, so they kicked out the former leader, and
Yeah,
then
Anami Paul.
yeah.
Effectively, the party didn't like her because she's Jewish,
Mhm.
and they refused. And they were like, "No, it's not because she was Jewish. It's because she was Jewish." She had a very tepid view on Israel, where like you shouldn't kill Israelis. Also, Israel's bad in other ways. Like it's a very typical like lefty politician's perspective on Israel, but they didn't like her because she's Jewish. Everyone knows that. And that's why they kicked her out. And because the Green Party has always been the party of carbon taxes and disliking Jewish people,
Yeah.
that they brought back Elizabeth May because she's the only thing that was actually working in keeping the party together and also being able to win seats. So now I think that the Green Party is just probably going to win the same 3 seats because as much as Elizabeth May brought the party to new heights. She also, I think, locks the party into only being appealing in very, very small areas of the country simply because her politics are just so weird. She is like a very granola, very farmer's market kind of a green politician in such a way where you think, well, that is what a green politician is. Go to Europe. That's not what a green politician is. They're usually more liberal in the way that they hold themselves with a lot more green policies that they push forward, a lot more environmentalist policies. Elizabeth May is more so somebody who believes in like alternative medicine and is like a farmer's market, I own healing crystals type of a person, and that is never going to be appealing outside of certain provinces.
Okay. Yeah, and but does Elizabeth May hold the grip on Green Party? And there was like a deputy leader. He resigned, but he said it wasn't like Elizabeth May, but he resigned it for fa- family reason. So, do you think is there a Elizabeth May role playing to kicking out these two leaders, like the current deputy leader and then
Uh, I'm not really sure. I think it was like they were doing this kind of co-leader thing. It's what Quebec Solidaire does, and he said he was for personal reasons. I'll just assume that that was it. Like it was family reasons he had to step back. I think that she really is the one holding the party together, but I think that would just be basically saying that the party doesn't have a reason to exist unless the party gets like a super charismatic leader and it becomes like a vehicle for them, and it's not really going to be worth anything. That's kind of the problem, is that if the party doesn't have like a charismatic person holding it together, and Elizabeth May is not that charismatic, but she's like a big personality, then the party's not going to survive. So Anami Paul was what you could probably say is a fine leader for another party, of a bigger party that
yeah.
had more infrastructure and more brand recognition. She could probably lead that. With the Green Party, you got to be a big personality to lead the Green Party. Frankly, I'd say Maxime Bernier has never been the right leader for the PPC because he just comes off too much like a Montreal politician. That's kind of
Mhm.
the dirty secret with the PPC is that it seems like no, they're a hardcore right-wing party and all this stuff, and they appeal to the base that Polyev is also trying to win over. So in theory, he should be popular. Yeah, sure, they have a lot of good policies that a lot of people could agree with.
Mhm.
Also, the problem is the leader is a Montreal Ponce who comes off extremely elitist no matter how much he leans into populist language. The man wears like $300 button-up shirts at every event and they're all like weird colors and stuff like that. I'm like, that's exactly the Justin Trudeau weird socks thing. He's got to stop. And the thing is good because Maxime Bernier is a little too obsessed with himself in a
Mhm.
way that's not useful.
Yeah, but do you think the PPC would be better if Maxime Bernier would step down?
I think it's just that they have to actually I think that it doesn't matter who the leader is right now. Bernier could do this or another leader. I think another leader would perform better than Bernier because Bernier I find is just too desperate for attention at times. Like randomly, he's now pro-life. He's never been pro-life. He's been somebody who goes at he when he was a conservative, he'd go after other conservatives for not being pro-choice enough. So it's a lot of his poses have looked kind of fake.
Mhm.
But I think with the PPC, the biggest problem is they don't have infrastructure. And this isn't a money issue. Oh, it's just them being a small party. Other parties smaller than them on provincial levels have done it properly. The New Blue Party of Ontario has an EDA in every riding that files its returns properly, has a board who meets with the PPC. They have tons of EDAs that get deregistered because nobody's even maintaining them. If you can't maintain the EDA, I don't know what to tell you. You're not going to win the riding. You're not going to win the riding in an election if you can't show that you can govern an EDA properly first. And the problem is that the party did way too much reach out to people who are terminally online. And I'm online all the time too. I'm a little bit terminally online as well.
Yeah.
But the problem is you get a lot of guys who like making noise on social media,
Mhm.
and they were given the positions as EDA presidents. They were being given the positions as candidates when they should have been picking like business owners in a riding who are well respected and who will actually add 4 or 5% to your outcome on
Mhm.
election days just because of who they are. That's usually the theory in Canada. If
Mhm.
a candidate's really good, the best that they can usually add 5 or 7% to your outcomes. So in 2021 and 2019, if the candidates weren't just activists, you would
Yeah.
actually do far better. And that's always been the problem with the Greens. It's activists,
Yeah.
it's students who are the candidates, and people don't
Mhm.
take them seriously.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move to like by-election. So what do you predict from Montreal by-election, which is more focused, like we also have one in Manitoba, but it is not being much given coverage because
Yeah, Manitoba, I'm pretty sure was an incumbent liberal. It's going to go liberal again. It's it was like the Manitoba or like Winnipeg Center by
yeah.
election. It was pre-scripted in the sense that everyone knows what's going to happen, so we don't have to care.
Mm. But
Uh,
what about Montreal one?
yeah, the
So
Verdun riding. It's
Montreal,
it's
yeah,
three names, but I'm just gonna call it the Verdun riding. I think the Liberals will still win it, but on the off chance they lose it, all hell breaks loose and Justin Trudeau's leadership could actually be kicked out. Because if you're losing a Montreal riding, like goodness,
mm,
especially if they lose it to the NDP. I still think the Liberals are going to win it, and it's still going to be a story that's looking at historical turnouts and saying, how did they go from winning 52% of the ridings vote? I'm not sure what they got last election, but it's a safe
yeah,
riding.
yeah.
How did they go from winning it so easily last election to it being within a couple points? That's going to still be kind of cataclysmic for the party, knowing that this downtown Montreal riding, like right in the middle of the city, urban riding. How did they almost lose this riding? And I think a lot of the MPs around that riding are going to start freaking out. And I think the projections are going to start showing a lot of these safe liberal ridings are actually more so toss-ups. And
Mm,
if you can't hold on to Montreal as Justin Trudeau, that you can't win anything. That's just pathetic because it's like if you're a conservative leader and you can't win rural Saskatchewan and Alberta, you have to step down. If those ridings are not that you can't win them, but if they're not secure,
yeah.
that's a problem. And that's been the problem for Justin Trudeau is that his guaranteed ridings are no longer even guaranteed. So even though he'll win 90% of them, and even 95% of them, the fact that they might have to put more money and volunteers in those areas to keep them red is a problem.
Okay, yeah, and Winnipeg one, like that riding belongs to NDP, so it is being expected NDP would win it. But also longest ballot is also we saw in Toronto, St. Paul's. They played a crucial role, and they took out like around over 900 votes. They are doing the same thing in LaSalle by-election, like maybe they put out 100, I believe, candidates, maybe more than that, but this is their target. So
I
would this make an impact?
I don't really know. I don't think anyone showed up to the Toronto St. Paul by-election because a by-election voter tends to be more informed than a general election voter because if it's usually more partisan individuals or very, active news followers who vote in by-elections. I
Mhm.
don't think that the longest ballot really hurt anything. I think a lot of people showed up in Toronto St. Paul to vote on a longest ballot candidate either because they were the candidate or just because for a joke. They just did it because it's funny. So I don't think it's really going to hurt anyone because at the end of the day, if you show up to vote for the Liberal and you could probably just ask, like if you're really having a problem, you can probably just ask an election staffer, "Hey, I want to vote for this candidate. Can you just point them out onto the ballot for me?" And it's not that hard to probably find them. And the thing is that this could all, and the longest ballot committee, they're proportional representation activists,
Yeah.
and they're like, we're doing this to raise awareness. And it's like, how does this raise awareness at all? Because all you're doing is like, because all they could do is they could just basically pass a law where the same guy can't be the financial agent or the electoral agent for like 70 candidates and you're screwed. And you can maybe get six joke candidates on a ballot, but you're going to need like 20 people willing to be an election agent for somebody and do all their filings afterwards. And so if it's one guy who's willing to do it, they can get it done. But if not, they can't do it. And so I don't think they're going to have an effect on the outcome. I don't think that people pretending, oh, the longest ballot hurt the Liberals in Toronto St. Paul. I believe the lady based on her and on Don Stewart. Don Stewart was further down on the ballot in a more obscure place than the candidate he was running against, who I believe was actually on kind of like because the way that the ballot went, because it was so big, is it'd be like left down and then jump back up to the right down.
Yes.
Don Stewart was like was kind of like center bottom right. It was actually kind of hard to find. The other lady was kind of like middle top left. It was
Mm.
way easier to find her than him. And somehow this was like a conservative plot to hurt the liberals. I saw a lot of that theory going around as Cope trying to figure out why they got screwed over.
Mhm. Yeah, and also it was being said, like it was being discussed on X, that many liberals voted for conservative because they want to get rid of Justin Trudeau. So, so do you think Justin Trudeau will resign anytime soon?
If they're smart, they'll probably swap him out. And I know a lot of conservatives want him to stay in and like, oh, but if he leaves, it might be harder to beat the liberals in the next election. I'm like, guys, if your goal is to play on easy mode, that's pathetic. Just beat whoever the Liberal Party leader is, because I think it's good for the country that we set a precedent that when you suck at your job and nobody likes you, that you eventually leave. Know what I mean? I don't really want this to be the whole thing where, no, 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 Trudeau should stay because it means that we might win five more seats. Who cares? I don't really care. I want the bad leader to step down as fast as humanly possible.
Mhm. Yeah, and what do you take from BC election? Like BC conservative is rising and BC United they are falling and
They're
what is
irrelevant
it?
at this point. And if the great thing, a lot of people want like a merger to still happen or BCU should just join forces. No, no, no. BCU is actually helping the BC conservatives at this point because the conservatives, maybe if we assume the BCU is around 10%, they could maybe take another point and a half away from the BCU by election day, 1 point to 1.5 of federal conservatives who are still confused and still selecting United on the ballot whenever they're given a poll.
Mm,
But I think that United at this point is just keeping a lot of votes out of the hands of David Eby because a lot of them are going to be federal liberals voting for United. And
mm,
if United disappeared and now it's a straight up race between the NDP and Conservatives, I don't think that we take more than 50% of that vote. I think it would actually lean a little bit more NDP. But the entire election out here in BC, and I'm currently in Abbotsford, I'm actually going to address this little thing because the people on my show keep saying I have a mark on my lens. No, that's literally just a mark on the wall because I don't have a good wall out here. So I'm in Abbotsford South helping out Bruce Banman and the rest of the candidates in the Fraser Valley.
mm,
And the entire election's on a knife's edge. Fraser Valley right now, our goal is to win 100% of the seats in the valley here.
mm,
And then on the island, we can probably grab 2 to 4 seats. 2 seats is fine. 4 seats is amazing. And then in the Metro Vancouver area, there's also up north and then down south or east or whatever. Those areas we're doing well. Everywhere outside of the Metro Vancouver area and Vancouver Island, we're going to win potentially 75% of or 80% of the seats. We're going to do very well. The thing that we need to do now is dig into the sort of Metro Vancouver donut. So ridings like, and you know who he is, Brian Burgay's riding in Vancouver Langara. He's our conservative candidate out there. If we can win that, we can win all of Richmond because of Teresa Watt coming on board. And I do believe her coming on board is going to allow us to win all 3 of the Richmond ridings. There's a few other ones, and we can even technically win David Eby's riding in Vancouver Point Grey. Right now, if you look up the 338 numbers, they
mm.
only show him having a 75% chance of winning his riding again. If you have an 8 point lead in your riding, 338 would show you with like 100% chance of winning.
Yes.
75% means he's within 2.5 points of the conservative.
Mhm,
So I actually want, if I can get it done, I want to see if I can get the conservatives to move like 100 volunteers out to that riding in a day and door knock the entire thing in a day.
mhm.
David Eby has a massive ego, and I could see him then freaking out and then wanting even more volunteers sucked away from other ridings into his own riding and then losing 3 ridings just to try and secure himself. But it's looking good. If there is even a 1.5 point swing between the NDP and the Conservatives, or
Mhm,
not swing, but 1.5 point change, which would be a 3 point swing, I think we win. I think even if there's just like a 2 3 point swing is very realistic to happen, I think we win. I think on election day, we're going to have way better turnout than them. And I think that's going to be worth like several seats because when Leger hasn't put it out a poll for a while about the actual numbers on the ground, but they put out a number asking BC voters, how do you feel about the election? And a bad sign because there's not that many BCU voters that this could be describing. 31% of people said apathetic. They feel apathetic towards this election. And that was a poll where they only, like, let's assume 10% of that's all BCU voters. 100% of BCU voters are apathetic. So 21% left over. Even if you throw in some greens, all the greens, like 6, 7, 8% of the greens, there's still a lot of people left over who are probably NDP voters who are very apathetic because I don't see any BC conservative voters being the apathetic type because you're voting for a party to change government. You should be hopeful. Yes, maybe a couple percent of us have gotten apathetic and I'll vote conservative, but I'm getting tired of this. But we're going to be the party of energy, of
mhm,
change and vision, where the BC NDP, the problem is that they're purely on defense. And the best you can do while on defense is not losing territory. The worst you can do is have your front line collapse and everything falls apart. And so right now, the BC NDP is just going to hope that people are going to show up to maintain a government that nobody really likes that much.
mhm. Yeah, and how do you see Brian riding? So is he going to win? And is it because the MLA was from that riding where Brian is running? He says that
You
he's
mean
not seeking re-election.
Bruce Banman?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Abbotsford South is very safe for us. We're going to be doing some door knocking. Obviously, we want to door knock the entire riding probably twice. Just keep people on side, put some lawn signs up, grow the party. Because if you win a riding super hard, like we get 62% of the vote, which is pretty good, which would be like amazing. That usually has a knock-on effect in other ridings because people have friends and all their friends and family members don't live in the same riding. And the thing is that it has a bit of a word of mouth affect when people decide they're going to vote BC Conservative. Your
Mhm.
friends who are on the fence will probably vote BC Conservative then, and it kind of, has a domino effect that we're going for. And then also we can fundraise and make sure that we can get money to other ridings who are in need, because the BC Conservatives have not been able to benefit from the extremely skewed financing laws,
Yeah.
where you can only donate $1,400 per party per year,
Yeah.
which really just means you can donate $1,400. I'm not sure who's donating the maxed out donation to multiple different parties,
Yeah.
but what we have going on, which is so stupid, is that we have the NDP having a law that they get 33% of the money they spent in the 2020 election back. Any party that I believe got more than 10% in a riding, which is basically the NDP Greens and the NDP Greens and BC Liberals united in every single riding, and they get like $1.56 per year per vote that they got, which
Wow.
is insane. It's a massive incumbent advantage because
Mhm.
it allows any party that gets, like, it allows them, like the parties who are really already really big, who maybe nobody likes, to keep getting money even though the donations should have dried up a while ago. BC United should be completely broke, but they still technically have more money than the Conservatives, even though their recent fundraising has been terrible. It's because they've been able to bank a lot of taxpayer money over time. People don't really want to give that much money to the BC NDP anymore. They're still out fundraising us because they're a big established party still doing well in the polls, but they're not fundraising like in a party on the ascendancy. But they have a lot of money from 2020 from getting that $1.56 per vote that they got.
Mhm.
And this is
And
a province where that's millions a year.
okay, and so we saw like if we talked out 1 year ago, we were not expecting that BC conservative would be like this, like so. Did John Rustard play a key role, or it was his leadership, or they saw like what their federal counterpart like Pyri Puliar was rising, so because of that impacted BC conservatives to rise up.
It's mostly a John Rustad thing in the sense that if there was no leader for the BC Conservatives and Poilievre's on the ascendancy and very popular in BC, it's still a party that doesn't have a leader, doesn't have an MLA, so who cares?
Mhm.
So as soon as John Rustad joined it, and then especially after Bruce Banman joined and it became an official party, that's when it actually started really taking off. Because when Bruce Banman joined, I think they were still only around 12%, and BC United was at like 26%, 27%. And now since then, it's not, it doesn't, hasn't flipped. The BCU is even lower than 12%. They're at 8% or 10%. And they had to put out that scuffed poll the other day showing they're at 15%. Imagine having somebody publish a fake poll for you, and you are so pathetic you can only put yourself in third place because you know so nobody would believe you're in second, and you can only give yourself 15%. Like they're just dead at this point. And again, I don't want them to leave the race because they're helping the BC Conservatives by sticking around. But yeah, like I think it's a very winnable election, and I think our best asset is the fact that nobody likes or knows who David Eby is.
Mhm. Okay, thank you so much, Wyatt, for your time and for sharing all the information and your analysis.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Talk to you later, and let me know when the show is published, and I'll
Yeah,
share.
it will be published until like tomorrow at 3 p.m. and hopefully see you again.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Talk to you
thank
later,
you, and
Sammy.
yeah, good luck.